Fun fact, did you know on the day that we release this episode, it will be Cher's birthday?
Wow. Yeah, I honestly am not up to date on my share trivia, Pete. I'm ashamed of myself.
I just assumed she was a much bigger influence in your life than apparently. But the reason I bring up dates is we kind of miss celebrating Cinco de Mayo, sir.
Mm.
I feel remiss that it wasn't discussed in any fashion.
And my mom's birthday, which was the 18th. It was 2 days ago.
Oh, but surely you wished her a happy birthday in person, didn't you?
Obviously, I wish her happy birthday. I took her out for lunch. But I had to take her out for lunch a few days before because she had to work on her birthday, which is some bull. But hey, I don't make the rules.
I just want you to know and appreciate the restraint that I'm showing. I have not made a single joke about your mother or taking her out. So I want that to be on record.
Apparently, you've evolved over the last few years.
I wouldn't let it get out that I'm apparently a more mature and grown up person.
We're going on 16 or 17 years of you making Jake's mom jokes.
Yeah, well, tell your mom to not be an attractive lady and we can avoid a lot of this.
You got it.
All that being said, I feel like we probably should acknowledge Cinco de Mayo now and maybe discuss some lucha in some form or fashion. I know you have at least some background in the Mexican art of wrestling.
Absolutely. I love Lucha Libre, Pete. It's been one of my longtime goals and dreams to wrestle in Mexico. And it's actually been penciled in 3 times, Pete. 3 times I've been scheduled to go to Mexico. And it's happened 0 times. Little tear falling from my eye, Pete.
Is it all your drug convictions or what?
I have no drug convictions. See, I'm waiting until I go to Mexico to really get into the coke game anyway. So if there's going to be arrests, it's going to be when I come back from Mexico or when I try to come back from Mexico. I've been arrested for 0 drugs.
You think there's an amount of like cocaine that you could smuggle back in that would not get you life in prison?
In America, who knows? I don't know what the requirements are for a life in prison arrest. However, a buddy of mine, one of my good friends, one of my favorite people in the entire world, may or may not have gotten arrested trying to go back home to Japan with some illegal drugs, and it almost got him a long prison sentence.
Don't know factually, but I have to assume that the US is a little more lenient on the drugs than Japan.
Absolutely. Drugs in Japan are a huge no-no. They're a huge deal. And believe it or not, this story is about marijuana. Earlier, I was incorrect when I said it was about cocaine, but about marijuana. So that's like a serious felony in Japan. Marijuana can get you in some hot water. Several American wrestlers have been banned from the country for trying to sneak in weed, which is dumb. Because if you have some big money contract that just means you get to go to Japan for a few weeks and wrestle, and the only thing you can't do is smoke pot, you have a problem, Pete.
Yeah, it's really hard to argue that you don't have an addiction if someone's like, oh, hey, here's $100,000 for 3 weeks of your time, and you get banned because you couldn't go without weed for a few weeks.
Yeah, there's one guy in particular. He used to be with WWE that I really, really dislike because he just couldn't stop himself from having like some THC liquid or whatever in his stupid vape or something when he went to Japan because he's that much of a pothead. But that story's not about him. Me hating him is a story for another day, Pete. This story is about my friend Nosawa. I believe you've heard me mention Nosawa before.
Oh, yes. Big Money Nasawa, the guy who ensured that you could bring back souvenirs to all of your friends except me. Yeah, I know.
Absolutely. And for the refresher on that, a long time ago in one of our best episodes ever, entitled Panda Money, I talked about how my wallet got stolen and I lost a lot of money and didn't have any money for a few weeks in Japan. Well, when I mentioned this to a few dudes out at a bar, after they'd already gotten drunk and I thought they would forget about it, one of them whipped out a 10,000 yen bill, which is like $100 crisp, and just handed it to me. It was like, no, we take care of you, your family. That, my friends, is Nosawa. And then when I tried to give him that $100 back before I left, he said no and forced me to use that money to buy souvenirs for my friends and family, Pete not being included.
Yeah, I know. Thanks, prick.
I honestly don't know what I spent the money on, Pete.
I'm sure
I
it was Kit Kats, knowing you, a
I'm
wide assortment of
such
Kit Kats.
I'm such a pinch penny. I probably just didn't spend on anything. I did buy a couple bags of weird Kit Kats though for people to try at home, so it could have been Kit Kat money.
I don't know what else you would have spent it on, to be honest, because you made those Kit Kats last. All of your friends got an opportunity to taste Japan in their mouth.
Yeah, I think it was wasabi or green tea Kit Kats, and then there were also Sakura Kit Kats, cherry blossom flavored. Because Sakura is a huge, awesome thing. Sakura actually just ended in Japan. It's the most beautiful time of year. No place I would have rather been than Japan during cherry blossom season.
Is it like our Strawberry Fest here in the Midwest, sir? Is it
I have
that
no
level of
idea
glorious?
what Strawberry Fest is, so no, it's much more glorious because
You've
everyone
never
knows
been
what
to a
this is.
strawberry festival?
People travel from around the world to go to see the cherry blossoms in Japan. They don't travel from around the world to see the Strawberry Festival. That sounds weak.
That's all we got, man. You could have lied to me. I'll never know.
Yeah. So anyway, back to my story. My buddy Nosawa, he's the man. And also going back to drugs, in like 2012, my buddy Nosawa, who was pretty famous in Mexico, he has been for a long time. In fact, he even gets announced from Mexico usually, even though he is very, very obviously Japanese. Uh, he gets announced from Mexico, and he's like he does all this great lucha libre style, the very quick, athletic style of wrestling that's famous in Mexico. So in 2012, though, it turns out that he got some heat with some other people in the Japanese wrestling business, which in any business, obviously, we get a little heat with some people at work. You were telling me about some heat with you had with some people at work recently. I've been telling you about heat I have with people at work. Well, unfortunately, my buddy Nosawa and his girlfriend at the time, who is actually now a wrestler for WWE. And I hung out with her a few times in Japan too. She's like one of the best workers in the world. I won't mention her name or anything, but you can probably Wikipedia this.
Well,
They
because
went
of
to
her
Mexico.
pending criminal charges.
No, it's just like she's going to be famous now, and I would hate to get to come out that I was trying to besmirch her name because she didn't do anything wrong. It was just guilty by association, wrong place at the wrong time, and this incident almost ruined her career. And at the time, she was really young too. She was like early 20s, so that would have been bad. So I'm not shading anybody. I shade no one on this podcast, Pete. Right?
No one ever.
No, except for like Billy Corgan. Screw that guy. Anyway, Nosawa and his girlfriend at the time, they were going to Mexico and had a little tour. And at the end of the tour, somebody gave them a painting, like a painting of the two of them, like as a gift. But the wrestler who gave it to him stashed marijuana inside it, knowing that when they went back into Mexico or into Japan, that it would totally get caught. And they got arrested, and like it looked really really bad for them for a long time. And that's the type of thing where like you are shamed to the point where you would probably never wrestle again, and you would even hate to come out of your house, and your family might disown you, bro. It's a big deal.
Yeah, that would be pretty terrible, especially for something that people just treat as recreational and is legal around here.
Yeah, it's nuts. So it turns out Nasawa had pissed off some dude in Japan, and he was like the liaison for Japan and Mexico in this company, and he hired another wrestler to do this. The dude, he did it, but then his Japanese sense of shame kicked in, and he ended up coming forward and admitting what he did. So they ended up getting set free, and then I think he ended up staying in Mexico for like a decently long time because the extreme sense of shame. But yeah, so my buddy Nozawa, yeah, he got in some heat there for not actually trying to smuggle drugs, but getting planted to smuggle drugs. Nothing that cool and dangerous has happened to me yet.
Well, because you haven't officially lucha'd in Mexico. You have lucha'd a bit, though, haven't you?
There's a few times that I have actually put on a mask and done a little bit of lucha, Pete. In fact, last year in Indianapolis at the Indianapolis Public Library, we put on a lucha libre show, Rio Blanco Lucha, for a night, bro. Instead of White River Wrestling, we became Rio Blanco Lucha. We put on a show in legitimately the most beautiful venue I have ever stepped foot in, Pete. We were in the middle of the huge glass atrium. It was the most picturesque professional wrestling show in the history of life. And we got some luchadors, some legit Mexican luchadors coming down from Chicago, and a couple of my buddies and I donned masks, and then a few of my other friends didn't. So we have a history of lucha that way. So I love myself some lucha that way.
Isn't that the show that you got Rey Mysterio booked on?
Yeah, but he no-showed because I can't write a check that would clear for 20 grand for an appearance.
Oh yeah, I
He
get
didn't
it.
no-show as much as he was not booked, but it was something like that.
Yeah, stuff of legends. I'm just gonna say that I heard he was supposed to be on that show, and everyone else listening should just recite that
Hey
because
man,
they heard it on a podcast.
in a Twitter world, all it takes is one tweet. So if you just want to tweet that, who's to say whether it's true or not true, and no one's going to ask.
Yeah, and that's how legends are made.
Retweet with a comment that says, Rey Mysterio ain't care about the fans.
Oh no, you want that kind of heat?
I don't want that kind of heat. I'm just saying, if you say something like that, who's to debate it?
Fair point. Fair point.
Anyway, so but my buddy Nosawa is almost a thank for what would have been the fourth time I would have tried to go to Mexico, Pete, because I touched on this story, I think, very briefly at one point. In Japan in 2017, October of 2017, I know very well because I still have the laminate pass hanging from the mirror of my car. It's one of the most important things I own. There was a thing in Japan in Kurikan Hall called the Lucha Libre World Cup. So AAA, a company from Mexico, essentially puts on this super show once a year in Japan called the Lucha Libre World Cup. And they bring over some of the most awesome high flyers from Mexico. They bring some great high flyers from the States, sometimes Europe, and then they mix them in with some of the best high flyers from Japan. One night when I was wrestling in Hiroshima, we checked into the hotel and I walked down 7 flights of stairs to the floor because the elevator held one person at one time and took like 30 minutes to get you up and down. I ran to my buddy Nosawa outside smoking a cigarette because cool people smoke. And he's like, oh, hey, you hungry? I'm like, yeah, hungry. He's like, you like tacos? I'm like, obviously, I love tacos, bro. Amo tacos. That's how you say it, right?
But I think that's got to be a test, right? They know you don't drink, but if you also turn down tacos, I think they know you're just some kind of a plant, like you're a narc, because everyone loves tacos.
It took me a while to get over that no drinking thing, Pete. So I was gonna have to say yes to tacos, even if for some reason I was a freak and hated tacos. I had to admit to loving tacos. So I said, Nosawa-san, of course I love tacos. He's like, okay, 1 minute, we eat tacos. So I smile. I'm like, all right, great. So we jump into a taxi. I knew my buddy Nosawa was involved in the Lucha Libre show in some way, shape, or form. A few days later, the Lucha Libre World Cup. So I was like, oh man, I wonder if at any point of the night I should ask him if he would mind if I come hang out at the show, be a guest. Because, sometimes if you show up with the right people, they'll use you or they'll put you in contact with the right person. And really, word of mouth is how you get booked in our business, Pete. It's not really about being good, and it's never about showing up to help set up the ring. It's all about who you know. Now, we were in the taxi for like 2 minutes before he said something about, you like Lucha Libre? I was like, oh yeah, I love Lucha Libre. I was like, I want to go Mexico sometime. He's like, yes, Wednesday. He's like, Kurikan Hall, Lucha Libre World Cup. He's like, you come, my guest. I'm like, oh, awesome. He's like, you want to wrestle Mexico? I was like, yeah, of course. He's like, yes, my friend Vampiro. He use you. He gets you to Mexico. I introduced you Vampiro Wednesday. I was like, oh man, that was the easiest politicking I've ever done, Pete.
It's simply because the love of tacos made you kindred souls.
I was just in a taxi with a dude. I didn't even have to say a word. And they gave me what I wanted.
I don't think that's ever worked in life. That sounds like a creepy kidnapping story, actually, if you remove the context.
Yeah. I just got into the back of a taxi with a scary, tattooed Japanese man who is also a juggalo, Pete. Usually, this is how murders start. This is how Dateline 2020 starts.
Abso-friggin-lutely.
Yeah, Japanese juggalo with face tattoos, murders, and then just insert whatever age and ethnicity here. I was like, oh, great. So we're in that taxi, right? Well, where do we end up going, Pete? We go to a Lucha Libre themed taco shop in Hiroshima, Japan, of all places. So we go in and the place is decorated super classy. This is a high-end establishment and it has Lucha Libre stuff all over the walls. Not like overdone, not like too much, like maybe a Chili's or an Applebee's might have way too many things. This was just very classy. And then after a little while, we're hanging out in there, and Nosawa's partner, a dude named Masada, who also spent a lot of time in Mexico, he also happens to be a chef, just walks into the restaurant and just walks right behind the counter, and he just starts making food. Like, he doesn't work here. They know him, but like, he doesn't work here or anything. So he just starts making us food. And he and the other chef make us the world's best gourmet tacos. They're like the size of your hand. They weren't huge, and they were the most intricately designed little tacos. And they would just bring us a plate of 3 tacos. And right when they would set down the plate, they were like, "Oh, you want more tacos? Sí, más, por favor." And then a minute later, boom, another plate of 3 designer tacos, Pete.
Designer tacos. I think that's a fun way to say that. But it makes me feel like you have to wear skinny jeans to get in and get them.
I feel like if there was a type of place that would have been like a hipster taco shop in Hiroshima, it was this one. I didn't take my skinny jeans on the road with me, so I didn't know if I fit in or not, but I think I did. So yeah, we went to a Lucha Libre themed taco shop. I want to say it was called Acapulco, but I can't recall. I'm gonna have to look up the picture because I have a handful of pictures of this place. Flash forward a few days, we take the 13-hour bus back to Tokyo, and Wednesday I go ahead and head to Kirk and Hall. Now I don't really have like a way to contact Nasawa. I don't have his phone number or anything. I also don't even think I had cell service at the time. But I'm like, well, I guess I'm just going to go in the building and hope they don't question me. And people in Japan don't do things that they're not supposed to do. Like, people don't sneak into stuff, or if like they're in a place they're not supposed to be, they just wouldn't do that. So it's, in general, like, it's one of the best places in the world where if you just act like you belong and you're not an obvious tourist, they'll just kind of let you go. So I go to Kirk and Hall, one of the world's most famous sporting venues and professional wrestling venues ever. I'm like, oh man, I really don't want to go up the elevator and up the stairs and make a scene, because I always hate showing up to a show and being like, oh, such and such sent me. So I was like, well, you know what? I'm just going to sneak around back. I'm going to go up the stairs. So I'm going up the stairs, and Kirk and Hall is on the 5th floor of this building, which is like in Tokyo Dome City. So I get up there, and conveniently enough, because I don't even know what door to try and go in, I go up, and boom, there's my buddy Nosawa out on the balcony smoking a cigarette. I'm like, Nosawa-san. He's like, Jake-san, come. So I end up having to like hop over one rail because there's 2 separate steps, like one going up and one going down. Boom, I jump over one. We go inside. He immediately is like, oh, we get you pass first. First, we must get you pass, because heaven help me if I'm in there without like a staff pass or something like that,
You got to have credentials, bro.
They follow that kind of order. He runs me around the building a few times. Eventually, they give me a laminate, which is a staff pass, the one that's still hanging up in my car to this day, Lucha Libre World Cup. And so, boom, they hand me my laminate or whatever. And he's like, oh, we come, you meet Vampiro now. Nosawa was so cool. He took me immediately up to Vampiro. Man, I wish I had $1 for every single time I went to a professional wrestling show and a friend of mine who's booked on the show said, I'll introduce you to the promoter and try and put you over, and then didn't do anything even remotely similar.
I mean, surely they meant to. It just slipped their mind.
Yeah, surely. That's how it works. Like, even I went to Ring of Honor a few months ago in Detroit. My friend, who had some pull at the time, was like, yeah, man, I'll introduce you to the promoter. Yeah, we'll try and get you booked. I'm like, okay, great. Well, I got there like 6 hours early because I, of course, showed up to help set up, which is the number one mistake. And then the number 2 mistake, I go right up to my friend when she gets there. And I'm like, oh, hey, what's up? Da-da-da. She's like, oh, okay, cool. Hey, I'll try and find the people to talk to, as if she didn't know exactly who to talk to and couldn't have done it immediately. And that's how it works, Pete. That's how it's always worked for all time.
You know what would have been cool, though, right?
Hmm.
Just turn around the disrespect. When you meet Vampiro, just walk up and be like, oh, hey, Sting, how's it going, bro? And
Ouch.
just act like you're above it.
Yeah, see, I would have considered that if my homie Nosawa wasn't one of the best friends ever and took me legitimately straight up to Vampiro. He marched me directly up to Vampiro. He was the exception of the rule. Maybe 2 or 3 times in my life out of coming up on 16 years has somebody actually taken me right to the promoter and tried to get me on a show. And he's like, he brings me up. He's like, Vampiro, this is Jake-san. And this dude, Vampiro, turns to me, and I know who he is. Like, he was famous in Mexico for a long time. Canadian dude that plays a vampire, and he was on WCW as well. He wasn't very good, but killer look. $1 million look. Vampiro seems like a no BS kind of guy, and he turns to me, is like, hey, nice to meet you. What can I do for you? So I was like, you know what, Pete? If there's a time to shoot my shot, it's right now. So I was like, well, man, I really want to work for AAA in Mexico. I really want to work for Lucha Underground in the States. And Lucha Underground at the time was a pretty big show on TV. It was on the El Rey channel. It was pretty cutting edge because it was a professional wrestling show, but it was filmed like a movie. And it was just really awesome. It was on Netflix for a while, and now it's streaming on an app called Tubi, Tubi. Anyone who's listening who hasn't seen Lucha Underground, it's worth watching an episode or two just for the cinematography. So it was like a really cool cutting edge thing at the time. So Vampiro asked me what I wanted, and I was like, I want to work for AAA in Mexico. I want to work for Lucha Underground. He's like, okay, great. Yep, we can do that, man. And then he looked at me, he's like, did you bring your gear? I'll put you on tonight. I was like, holy crap. This worked for the first time ever, Pete. So he's like, did you bring your gear? Can you work? Are you on the card tonight? You can work tonight. So I kind of casually turned to Nasawa. Now, Nasawa was also one of the front office guys at my company at Wrestle One, which means, unfortunately, I have to ask the Wrestle One office for permission to work any show that's not Wrestle One, because they have my work visa and they have my contract. Like, since I'm contracted under them, I need their okay to do anything else, which sometimes you can get, but it's like, it takes a lot of negotiations and there's a lot of politics that go into it. So this show started at 8 p.m. and this was at 6 p.m. wasn't good for me. I turned to Nosawa and I'm like, oh man, what's he going to say? What's he going to say? And then he said something in, I believe in Spanish, to Vampiro. And Vampiro's like, shoot, you can't. He's like, your contract won't let you. I wish Nosawa had made the introduction and then stepped like 4 or 5 steps away. Like, if he had just turned his back and started talking to someone else, like somebody else should have came up immediately to say hi to him and hug him and just distracted him, because I probably would have been like, hell yeah, man, I will gladly work tonight. And then I could have just asked for forgiveness later.
Oh, whoops. I didn't thoroughly read my contract. Here, talk to my agent. He'll make it right.
Yeah. So it's not a written thing in the contract. It's an unwritten thing in the contract. I know better. However, it's one of those things where it's like, man, it's a lot easier to ask for forgiveness than it is for permission, especially when I can kind of play off American ignorance, and I probably wouldn't have gotten much trouble for it from Wrestle One, and it could have significantly helped me with Lucha Underground and with AAA, because I don't know what match they would have put me in, Pete. There were a lot of matches, and everyone on the show was talented.
Well, can I just say in retrospect, maybe it's all for the best, because I understand that Jericho and Vampiro have heat. And I know that you and Jericho are boys, and you're about to be on AEW. So, maybe it's for the best.
Well, see, you know how earlier when I said that none of my friends have ever actually stepped up to talk to a promoter for me?
Yeah.
Yeah. See, you've never called your good friend Chris Jericho to try and get me on AEW now, have you, Pete?
That's fair. That is on me.
Yep.
That's on me 100%.
See, you're part of the rule. My homie Nosawa, though, he's the exception. And you wonder why I didn't get you a souvenir with his money.
Oh, full circle.
Yeah,
that hurts.
Turning it around on you, homie. So, anyway, but yeah, so I've also heard that Chris Jericho and Vampiro have mega heat, and I can get into why, because I don't have, how do I say this? I don't necessarily have heat with Vampiro, but now I actually do have heat with Vampiro, Pete. Because
why's that?
It turns out he's a big dick. He's like, Vampiro's like, it's okay, no problem, you can't be on the show. He's like, hey, take my email. And he gave me his email, and I wrote it down to make sure it was perfect, even though it was legitimately vampiro@something.com. So I was like, yeah, hell yeah, man, for sure. So he's like, yeah, just let me know when you're back in the States.
You should have known it was his burner email when he said vampiro@aol.com.
Hey, I thought maybe he's nostalgic. Henry Rollins still has an AOL email address because he's nostalgic, Pete.
I don't know if that's why Henry Rollins still has it, but that's maybe a whole different episode.
Maybe it's hipster. Is it hipster?
That's what I was going to go with, yeah.
Man, yeah. At my merchandise table, I shouldn't even try and sell Jake Omen stuff anymore or other character stuff anymore. I should just try and sell America Online t-shirts for the hipsters.
Yeah, every t-shirt comes with a free America Online disc.
Oh, do you think I can find a stack of those discs somewhere? Maybe Goodwill.
Or old folks that are hoarders. Mm-hmm. I bet they just have rooms full of those things.
Holy cow. That would be great. I should sell that. Or maybe some AOL Instant Messenger related thing. Yeah, the hipsters
Yes,
love that.
the Jake Omen AIM chat on the front of the shirt.
Oh man, this sounds so good. It could be a conversation between me and someone like Vampiro, and I can tell him to stick it.
Yes, absolutely. I
Yeah,
think those would sell.
yeah. So anyway, I ended up going to Vampiro's website even later just to double check that the email address was right. It totally was right. It was also on his website. I emailed him like a few days later. I was like, "Oh, hey, dude, I met you, Nasawa's buddy. We talked about Lucha Underground AAA. I was like, I'll be back in the States in 2 months." And then about a month later, I was like, "Oh, hey, man, just touching base. I'll be back in the States in about a month." And then I got back to the United States, and I was like, "Hey, bro, I'm back in the United States." And I've had exactly 0 email responses from Vampiro.
When's the last time you emailed him?
Oh, probably early 2018. So yeah, about 2 years, man.
Yeah, you've been muscly Jake since then. I guess you
Mhm.
weren't scumbag Jake at the time. I was going to say maybe that was the reason.
Yeah, maybe I'll send him an email here again at some other point because who knows? Maybe I have some character that wears a mask that's trying to get booked too, and he might like that character. I don't know. Maybe he'll actually book me. I don't really care if everyone in the world hates him because as long as I'm his friend and for some reason he has power in these companies, he can look out for me, right?
So far, he sounds like a man of his word. So yeah, I would look to ally myself with him for sure.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if he can get me to Mexico, Pete, I've been trying to go to Mexico for 16 years and it's worked out 0 times.
I may have connections that could get you into Mexico. I used to hang out with some guys that had some badges who work on the border.
Yeah, I don't think they're friends with many of the Mexicans though.
That's a fair point. I did not think that through.
We should have an episode where you talk about your border control days, Pete.
That might still be classified. I don't know what I am and am not allowed to discuss.
Fair enough. Fair enough. We do get so many listeners that it could get you in trouble.
It's true, man. I don't know if you've taken a look at our numbers, and not to be boastful, but the show continues to grow. I think it's because of our fantastic fans sharing and telling their friends.
I would love you to send me that link so I could look at the analytics again because I love crunching numbers, Pete. And I do want to say thank you to all of our loyal listeners. They're the best listeners. They're the most attractive listeners.
I have seen at least 2 of them, and they were not ugly. At the time, we had heat because I called them pricks, but they've gotten more shout outs via the prick comment than I think any of our fans ever have. They should feel honored.
Good looking listeners, Pete. Anyway, that being said, I could put over how attractive and smart and funny all of our listeners are for days, but alas, I won't. I will just thank them for their service. And if there's any new listeners out there that have not left a comment or a review, that would be super sweet because it does help all the algorithms. Pete, anything you'd like to add? I think that wraps up everything I have to say about my super awesome friend Osawa, who has never actually screwed me over.
If people are interested in the Jake Omen AIM merchandise, you got to make your voices heard. This is how merch is made, how stuff gets sold.
I have great graphic designers on call if I know these are going to sell. Maybe I'll get a pro wrestling tees store at some point.
That's how you know you've made it, right? There's very few things that are indie as the pro wrestling store.
Yeah, man, I'd rather just sell my stuff at merch tables, but I have so many international fans now because of my huge fame that I should probably be able to send stuff to them really easily.
Do they take care of international?
Oh, of course they take care of international, Pete. It's not a mom and pop shop up in Chicago.
I just didn't know they went the international route. I guess I will mock them a little less.
I'm assuming. I don't know. I don't have a pro wrestling tee store. Ace Perry just got one though, so I would just check it out at pro wrestling tees / probably Ace Perry.
Yeah, find him at prowrestlingtees.com/TempleFit.
Yes. Oh man, I need to take a picture of him reenacting the Temple Fit advertisement where it's like just the lower half of his chin and then way too much of his pelvic bone.
I will volunteer to do an ad campaign for Ace Perry's Temple Fit. I will shoot photos and video if he will promise to utilize that in some fashion because
Bro,
I think it's hilarious.
If he sold that on a t-shirt, he would make a lot of money, and he knows it too with his fan base. We had a conversation about his eccentric fan base the other day and their preferences.
Their preference for the Perry pelvis.
All right, Pete, I want to thank you. Thanks to our listeners. Keep fighting the good fight in quarantine. In the meantime, we are at OffTheCliffPod on everything, at Jake Omen 2012, at Multimedia Hustle. Feel free to check out the YouTubes, also OffTheCliffPod, for any of our archives.